I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
It makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Walter here. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. It's very hot outside here in sunny Michigan. I know, like, I listen to, some people, like, when I'm, like, doing other things, right? For a little bit of background noise. They're, like, podcasters and people on Twitch. And it's always funny. They're like, reporting here from sunny California. And I'm like, it's kind of overcast here in Michigan, I guess. I don't know. It's like it feels like a flex. You know what I mean? Like, I live in California where it's almost always sunny and it never rains. And I'm like, I don't know. Probably next week it'll snow here in Michigan. I mean, anybody who's from the state, you guys know. You guys know. But anyway, welcome to the show. It is technically sunny, but it's like 90 degrees. So awful. 90 degrees, a little humid. And I'm gonna be 100% honest. I feel like a balloon right now that is ready to pop. So yeah, let me just explain that for a second. So I've got acid reflux, like, bad. Okay, so, like, I suffer from that every day, and it sucks. It really does. And I decided, like, I'm gonna lose a little bit of weight. Maybe that'll help out. So I'm gonna eat something healthy. I'm gonna eat a salad, right? Eat a salad for lunch. Strawberries, grilled chicken, lettuce. Yeah, not really nothing out. A little bit, tiny bit of cheese. All right. And yet, like, nothing that should be super offensive. Even it's pretty small too. Shouldn't be anything offensive. No. Massive heartburn. I feel like my stomach's gonna explode. So I'm like, oh, great. Awesome. So try to eat healthy, and I feel like garbage. Eat normal, I feel like garbage. Either way, I feel like garbage. So that's today. Combined with the fact that I didn't sleep very well. So we're in for a fun show where I'm like, I feel like trash. The news is trash. Everything's trash. Go. It's like, it's the year made manifest. It's just a gigantic garbage fire all the way around. So awesome. Speaking of what we're going to talk about on today's show, is we got the question about stimulus. Are we getting stimulus? Is the states going to get stimulus? Are the Republicans going to take up the Phase 4 stimulus package passed by the House? House Democrats. We'll see. We'll see. We also have Donald Trump tweeting out conspiracy theories about Martin Gugino. Now, I love this guy. He's a guy, of course, that was facing down the cops and literally got pushed over. 75-year-old activist. When I did the story, I didn't know his name. Okay. So I didn't know the name. And so now I do. And this guy's a hero. This guy's an awesome person. And yet here you go. You got Donald Trump that's literally smearing him with, I mean, ridiculous. Like, just ridiculous conspiracy theories. All right. And then we have Tucker Carlson's most racist segment yet. I'm going to show you that. Disaster. Then we've got cops slashing tires. Who are the thugs? Who are the thugs going? Because from what I've been seeing, pushing over 75-year-old men, activists, tear gas, which is banned in this country, but or should be banned in warfare. Actually, is banned in warfare. Should be banned in this country. Throwing that at protesters and peaceful protesters, charging them, cracking skulls, cracking heads, taking out, people that are just reporting on this. Who are the thugs? I mean, we're getting told over and over again, oh no, these violent thug protesters, they're the problem. When it appears that the police seem to be doing the most thuggish behavior. So very interesting. So we're going to talk about that because that is complete and utter insanity. And so I can't wait to get to that, assuming I don't explode or my stomach does not explode. So there's that. So now a lot of you were asking me, or some of you were asking me where I was yesterday. I said on Friday that I was going to take a personal day. It's this weekend was 2-year anniversary of when I actually lost my big sister. So she died 2 years ago. And so I took some personal time off for that. And to kind of reset from this absolute insanity, the news that's going on. And of course, the insanity never goes away. And so, we're here. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be a day. Yes, I noticed some of you took a break from reality as well. That's a good idea. Time and time again, every once in a while, just to try to, if you don't, you're going to burn yourself out. And then you might even become numb to it after a while and lose your sense of outrage. And at this point, I don't think we can afford to lose our sense of outrage. All right. That said, let's go into the stimulus bill. Now, if you're wondering if there's still a possibility of getting another $1,200 coronavirus relief check, prepare to be disappointed, unless you didn't think there was a possibility, which then you're probably like, well, yeah, I didn't expect that to happen. So now, according to Politico, who spoke to Senate Republicans and their aides, and those are the people, of course, holding up the second, I'm sorry, not the second, but I was going to say second coronavirus check, but there's more to this phase 4 stimulus, as we talked about, a lot of funding to the states as well. And all this other stuff that's actually included in this piece of legislation. But I'm going to focus on the $1,200 and the aid to the states, for this story. Well, the House already passed it, and that's the Democrat-controlled House. And by the way, they could have done something a lot stronger because they had known that this wasn't going to pass in the first place. White House is against it, and Senate Republicans are against it as well. And so, again, this was the phase 4 stimulus bill. And now these Republicans are saying, look, we really have no intention of really taking this up or even talking about it, at least until July. Interesting. So now, here's what the report said. buoyed by a surprisingly strong jobs report last week and the knowledge that some of Congress's $2 trillion March spending package still hasn't been spent. So now notice that, the lion's share of the money went to corporations and business, right? Big business. So they haven't spent that. And there's a reason for that. It's because they don't really need it. Whereas I'm pretty sure most people who have received that $1,200 stimulus have already spent it on rent, bills, food, supplies, etc. So there's that, right? But they say, oh, most people, most of that money hasn't been spent. We got to wait and see what effect it has on the economy. And so they say that the Senate GOP remains non-committal on the timing and substance of the next piece of legislation. This is reported by, of course, Politico's Burgess Everett and Marianne Levine. And they said, bipartisan talks still haven't begun in earnest, according to senators and aides, and the White House and senior Republicans say they won't start until, like I said, July. And so part of the reason, of course, as I mentioned before, it's because you had some of the money that isn't spent yet. And also, look at the jobs report. We had a fantastic jobs report. In fact, unemployment is now at 13.3%. We added 2.5 million jobs. Look at the unemployment rate. We don't need no more stimulus. No, we're done with that. Get back to work, America. Let's do this. Well, here's the thing about that jobs report. Like old jobs reports, it's not exactly accurate. Okay? It doesn't tell the whole story. Buried in the report is the fact that some workers had been improperly counted as employed rather than unemployed. So now, this is a classification error. If those workers had been classified correctly, the unemployment rate in May would have been 16.4%. And look, in some months, of course, it was higher. Other months, that rate is lower. So understand, right? In fact, when the coronavirus pandemic began, the Bureau of Labor Statistics decided that anyone who wasn't working because of virus-related business closings should count as unemployed, with or without a formal layoff. But starting in March, the agency noticed that an unusual number of people were being counted as employed but absent from work, a category meant to reflect vacation, family leave, or other temporary absences. The Bureau estimates that the issue probably affected about 5 million people in May, and they said if all the potentially misclassified people had been counted as unemployed, the jobless rate would have been a point higher in March, 5 points higher in April, and 3 points higher in May. And so that has a significant effect on this. Now, that said, for clarity, the gain of 2.5 million jobs was based on a separate survey of businesses and therefore was unaffected by the classification issue. Nonetheless, when it comes to the real unemployment rate, the known as U6, right, we have near 20% unemployment. So that's really bad. The official, like I said, the official rate or the most friendly rate to whatever administration, and I'm not saying the Obama administration hasn't also, used these kinds of numbers to say, hey, look at the jobs report. They're so great. Yeah, but you're not using the U6. You're using the other count, which is much more friendly. So understand that this is something that all politicians use, but it's not reflective of the reality of the unemployment here in America. And so now that said, right, all of this factors into the rate, which is already, again, not accurate. It only counts people actively on unemployment and job seeking. If you're one of the millions who are not able to get unemployment, by the way, for example, Florida has a system that is old, that's antiquated, and basically was set up to fail. The whole purpose was to make sure that as few people got unemployment benefits as possible. That's the whole freaking point. And so there are millions as a result of that, of Floridians that are not able to get their unemployment benefits. You also have terrible, a terrible system that was set up in Michigan that just doesn't have enough resources. You have this all over the country. And look, to be honest, you'd be hard pressed to find a system that could really handle the enormous wave of people across the country that had to get jobless rates because we closed down the economy as a result of coronavirus. And so, be honest about this. Nobody was ready for it. And so, yes, they're not counted because they're not getting benefits. And so, again, this goes to the U6, which is near unemployment of 20%, which is disastrous. It is absolutely disastrous. So now, that said, these 2.5 million jobs, where did they come from? Why was everybody surprised about this? Well, they shouldn't have been, because this is what happens when you aggressively reopen parts of the country. Again, I mentioned, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. A lot of these states and others have been reopening very aggressively. Brian Kemp fudged his own numbers in order to show that, oh, look at that, we've got a declining coronavirus infection rate. Therefore, we are ready to open up. Let's open up the state, back to business. Let's go. Well, when you reopen the state, obviously, you're going to force people to go back to work who are not ready to go back to work, but they don't have a choice as they can't stay on unemployment if their job basically, or their place of employment offers their job back. And so there's that. Can't get unemployment if you refuse a job. So again, those count as, hey, job creation numbers, right? And people going back to their jobs. And not to mention, there are new jobs as well. I mean, for example, a lot of service sector jobs were created as a result of coronavirus pandemic. For example, you look at like Shipt, you look at like Instacart, and you look at Amazon, and you look at more of these online businesses. Well, they've seen a surge in employment because, these services are now used or utilized by a lot of people who, don't want to go shopping for themselves as a result of coronavirus. And so there's that. And so there's a lot of nuance in this number, right? In these numbers. And so nonetheless, the administration is saying, well, look at that. We don't need any more stimulus. We're bouncing back, and we're bouncing back hard. And that's a good thing. So now that means no more stimulus, even though we're not done with coronavirus, or I should say coronavirus isn't done with us. And so, but as a result, they're saying, well, that's it. We don't need more money. No more coronavirus checks for you. No more money for the states. No more money for any of that. We're done with it. Although also national debt. You weren't worried about the national debt when you passed gigantic tax cuts for the rich. But now we're concerned about the national debt. Awesome. Great. So now, again, they want to return to business. These Republican congressmen, as usual, especially since they were able to successfully funnel trillions of dollars to the rich, to their donors, the corporations, to the people that need it the least. And so now, with their theft complete, they say, well, we're done with that. Even though we still have the Fed giving trillions of dollars in liquidity to the banks. They're still getting propped up, but the American people are not. So now, according to this report, Republicans say, well, look, it's only responsible that we wait and see how the spending seeps into the economy. We got to wait and see. We got a wait and see approach. Well, they're not going to do anything. In fact, as one Republican, this is Senator John Cornyn, he says this, I think conditions are definitely going to improve. We've seen the virus take down the best economy in the world, but it looks like it's pretty resilient and starting to come back. He said the jobs report surprised everybody. Again, didn't surprise me. And let's be honest, the virus didn't take down the biggest economy in the world. No, the virus, what we did is that we shut down sections of the economy to make sure to minimize infections and loss of life. And according to a report, doing so in the way that we did prevented 60 million additional cases of coronavirus. from sweeping the country. So I would say fairly effective, right? As opposed to, what was it, the Swedish model, where they just let it run rampant. And even the health minister was like, I didn't think it was going to be that bad. But as I said before, coronavirus isn't done with us yet. We still are plateauing in our cases. We still have not had this reduction that we need. And so I believe the newest numbers is that we're gaining about 20,000 new cases a day. Part of that, of course, is because of increased testing, but we still don't have adequate numbers of testing. And so there are large problems here. And so we're still not meeting the basic requirements of not allowing this thing to spread. And so, and yet we're moving forward. Open it up, they say. And so not good, man. Not good. And of course, it's not going to be good for the economy as well. And that is the problem, right? So now this leads me to what Republicans were worried about in this. They said, quote, it's also a gamble. If the economic recovery isn't as strong as they predict, this is from the article, they risk being blamed by voters in November that they and President Trump didn't do enough amid a global pandemic and historic recession. And so right now, they know the situation and they know, well, look, are we going to help everybody by doing another phase 4 stimulus? Or are we just going to, take that risk and not give people more money? Well, we see what direction that we're going right now. And I don't think that they're going to change, but I don't know. The fear, of course, is that they're wrong and the economy implodes. And so far, I think, again, I don't know for, entirely, I can't say for certain, but from what I've seen, it looks like they're not going to go in that direction. They're not going to help people. They're going to let it implode, and we'll see. I mean, they're going to hope that, forcing people back to work, is this going to be good enough? And that we're not going to care about the additional amount of workers, or that'll get COVID-19, or, the other thing is that they've been downplaying this virus for some time. Maybe they believe it. Like, no, it's not a big deal. And you shouldn't think it's a big deal. And then when it becomes a big deal again, and I'm thinking like fall, right? That's when it's going to make a second wave comeback, which is going to be devastating. Well, then they're going to say, well, we didn't think that this was going to happen. And that's going to prompt an even more rigorous shutdown and another economic disaster. I hope that doesn't happen, obviously, but I mean, who knows? Playing with this virus, I mean, it's playing with fire, essentially. You're going to get burned. Now, the thing that is going to work against Republicans is the fact that poll after poll, by the way, Americans are not ready to go back to work because Americans do understand and we do listen to the science, right? They're not ready to get back to sitting in restaurants, going to movie theaters. And even if many people are, which there is a certain subset of people who are ready to get back to quote unquote normal, right? The lack of income support during this lockdown is going to make it very difficult for them to be able to do so. And so when you have an economy that depends on consumer spending, if you don't have consumers that can spend, well, that's not going to be good either. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see high unemployment for some time. No matter what administration, if Trump wins, we're still going to see that high unemployment. And if Biden wins, we're still going to see that because we are not taking the necessary precautions and we're not taking care of the people the way that we should as, we shut down the economy and reopen it slowly. So this is the problem. All right. President Donald Trump earlier today took to Twitter to attack a 75-year-old. So now this is Martin Gugino, who was assaulted by Buffalo police, and Trump made some tweets, one in particular that implied that he was a terrorist. He said, Buffalo protester shoved by police could be Antifa provocateur. 75-year-old Martin Gugino was pushed away after appearing to scan police communications in order to black out equipment. And he tags One American News Network. He said, I watched. He fell harder than was pushed. Was aiming scanner. Could be a setup. Oh, first of all, it wasn't a scanner. It was a phone. Which makes sense. If you're trying to get close to film officers' badge numbers, which should be public, right? They're not allowed to cover their badge numbers. No, those numbers should be public. We should know who these officers are because they work for us, or at least in theory, they're supposed to. And so filming an officer and filming their badge number shouldn't be illegal. But hey, that wasn't, apparently that was enough for the police, filming that to basically shove him down and make him bleed from his head. Now, you guys saw the video. I'm not going to show that here. And so there's the problem, right? So now, Gugino, as I mentioned before, he was pushed down so hard he bled. He's in the hospital in serious but stable condition. But according to Trump and One American News, well, he's the bad guy. He's terrorist Antifa. And he was trying to black out communications, which is ridiculous, right? So now the reason that I mentioned, they think he's a terrorist, right? Donald Trump tried to label and get this official, right, that Antifa is a terrorist organization. Well, for one, Antifa is not an organization. It's basically an ideology. It literally is anti-fascism. And now look, we're all anti-fascists, or at least I know a lot of you watching are, right? So it's an ideology. We're against fascism. Now, to some people who are against fascism say that, well, we're against it and we're going to do everything that we can, including use violence, to prevent fascism from taking hold in America, or to fight back against instances where we believe these people or organizations are fascist, and we will employ violence. And so that is what we're going to do, right? But understand, right? Anti-fascism is a literal American tradition. I'm just saying, nearly all Americans are anti-fascist. But as I mentioned, the difference is some of us are willing to meet violence with violence. Now, Gugino isn't in that group, right? He's actually a longtime Catholic peace activist, right? So he's somebody that says, I believe in non-violence. And he was met with state-sanctioned violence, which is kind of ironic. But I believe he's a hero. But Donald Trump says, no, he's Antifa. He's a provocateur. And it's his own fault that police shoved him down because he was doing something wrong. But he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was, again, just out there yes, he was doing nonviolent, peaceful protests. And that was it. Now, you want to look at who's actually a terrorist, who's actually causing terror and death, right? Well, you have far-right extremists who cause death. These are people that are extreme anti-government groups, people like Sovereign Citizens that have killed police officers. I don't remember the right-wing outrage over that, when several, I think it was Texas police officers, were killed by these Sovereign Citizens. And that's a far-right movement, as I said before. I don't remember them being outraged when they were aiming guns at federal police or federal, Bureau of Land Management people and federal troops and police. These Bundy folks were literally aiming weapons. They took over government property. I don't remember the right wing being outraged about that. I actually remember them being on the side of the Bundys. And so, look, right-wing groups, they have been responsible for killing more American citizens than Muslim extremists. Whereas the death toll from Antifa, right, stands at 0. Yeah, they'll punch someone in the face and they'll throw a milkshake. I'm not saying that I condone that. I'm just saying that when you compare that, I mean, you can see who the real danger is. Okay. And so now Trump shows how much of a garbage person he is, because instead of taking the side of the peaceful protester and say, hey, you know what? That was not cool for that police officer to do. Me and the Justice Department, we're going to look into this, and we're going to make sure that all peaceful protesters, as this guy was, are treated fairly. We will crack down on rioters and looters, but we will make sure that every American has their ability to be able to peacefully assemble and all that under the First Amendment. See, he would have actually done something good. Like, he would have not been an ass if he had come out with a statement like that. Instead, he's like, no, I'm in favor of police pushing over elderly people because something Antifa. No, ridiculous. Ridiculous. Garbage. And so now he bases this off a report from, as I said, One America News. But wait, One America News is a literal propaganda arm that has created fake news. How dare they call themselves news? Again, it's fascist Republican propaganda, literally set up to lick Donald Trump's boots. And it's so gross to see the word news, the descriptor of news, assigned to that. So now, actual journalists, right, whose job isn't to lick boots, but to actually hold people in power accountable, depending on the, not depending on the party, right? No, you hold Democrats accountable, hold Republicans accountable. Again, let me point out that in a lot of places that have used this police presence, you had Democratic mayors that are out there ordering the police to go and crack skulls. So understand, this isn't partisan. This is power versus the powerless. And in this point, you have people that support Black Lives Matter that are the ones without the power. And that's why they have taken to the streets. And that's why, of course, white allies have joined them in protesting against this state-sanctioned violence from police. So now, here's journalist Steve Greenhouse. He says this, quote, wow, Donald Trump in effect stomps on a 75-year-old peace activist who was pushed by police, fell over backward on the ground, and started bleeding from his head. Wow, what an amazingly uncompassionate president we have. Intercept journalist Jeremy Scahill said this, no one should be assaulted by the police this way. But for the record, this 75-year-old is a pacifist Catholic worker who dedicated his life to nonviolence, serving the poor, living the servant on the mount, and fighting for justice in the spirit of Dorothy Day and Peter Maurin. Again, if you want to talk about like Martin Luther King Jr., right? This guy, and I'm not saying like he's the modern Martin Luther King Jr., but he seems to be following in his footsteps as far as nonviolence. You know what nonviolence got Martin Luther King Jr.? Assassinated. And so remember that. I love when conservatives share these pictures of, Martin Luther King marching, whether it be in Selma, Alabama, or in other places that he has marched in favor, not only of course, Black, African-American rights and civil rights, but also to support things like socialism, which he has talked about, and workers' rights and labor unions and things that help white working class people as well. Those marches, you see the peaceful march, but what you don't see is the aftermath. What you don't see is police using fire hoses and sicking, dogs on these peaceful marchers. And it's the same thing that we're seeing now, but we just haven't seen any water cannons yet. And I don't know if we will. I hope we don't. So now you have this guy, as I said, the embodiment of nonviolent Christian protest. And on the other side, you have basically stormtroopers. Now, that assault from these guys resulted in the suspension and charging of 2 officers. It's Aaron Torgalski and Robert McCabe. And as a result of charging, right, you had 57 members of that emergency response team, right, that resigned in solidarity with the 2 officers. Not because of the brutality and like, hey, man, we're taking a stand and you're right, this whole thing was wrong. No. They're like, we think it was fine. Let's crack some heads. Let's bust some heads. Let's roll over these hippies and, assert our dominance. Let's dominate the streets like Donald Trump says. 57 officers couldn't stand it that their friends were charged. You got to be kidding me. One more here. Journalist Windsor Mann, actually a couple more, said this: Trump blames a victim of police brutality for police brutality. Yeah, his fault. His fault. It can't go and, get near a police officer. Okay. And then the Hill's Now Standage says, takes a lot for Trump tweet to be genuinely shocking at this point, and yet here we are. And I'm going to say that I'm kind of desensitized to Donald Trump. Like, I expect him to say insane, fascistic, crazy things, authoritarian things, and to do authoritarian things. I expect it because that's what we've seen. It's Trump. What do you expect? What do you expect? And now, Intercept senior editor Peter Moss says this: not much going on here. Just a racist far-right conspiracy theorist who's president in the United States, and about 40% of the electorate is going to vote for him in November. Scary thought. But, look, this shouldn't be a surprise, as I said. We knew Donald Trump was an authoritarian. I knew he was going to be a disaster. And as usual, unfortunately, some of our worst predictions are inevitably proven correct. Yay. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with Tucker Carlson. Is this his most racist segment yet? We'll do that. And then we'll get to Minnesota police and how they're the thugs. Awesome. All right. Stay right here. We'll be right back around the nation.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. TOT Nation with you. All right. So first, I want to thank some patrons. Patreon.com/TOT Nation. I want to thank Becca Rangel, And let's see. Let's get somebody new. Ann Smith. So thank you. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's so you can support independent progressive media. Then I want to thank two new channel members as well, Kate Purple and Kriana Beasley. So thank you for signing up to support independent progressive media through the channel membership program. That's awesome. So thank you all. All right, moving on here. Let's get in and we'll talk about Tucker Carlson. Or I like to call him Tucker Carlson, but that's just me. All right.
This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate, they will.
They're going to come for you. Ridiculous. Of course, that was Tucker Carlson and what many are calling his most racist segment yet. We'll have to see on that one. But so, wait, he's talking about the mob, right? So who's this mob of people? Black Lives Matter. So you mean black people, right? And they're coming for you. They're coming for you. Really? Why would they come for you, Tucker Carlson? I mean, other than, of course, all the hideous things that you say, but you're telling your audience that these people are coming for them. Well, now, wait a minute. Here's the thing, right? So now, earlier in the segment, he talked about armed mobs of Black Lives Matter people. Now, wait a minute. I thought the left was trying to take away guns. On the contrary, I'm actually seeing a lot of people on the left looking at gun ownership or have already purchased weapons to defend themselves against, well, what they perceive as fascists. So I'm actually seeing a surge of people that are arming themselves on the left. The left, they're trying to take your guns, and they also make the argument, and I've heard this before, that, hey, man, we shouldn't be relying on the police. This is a conservative argument that I heard against gun control. Because, man, in the time that you're waiting for the police to show up, a criminal can kill you 4 times and rape your entire family, plus your dog. So you'll be dead. The criminals. And so if you take away the guns, only the criminals are going to have guns, right? But again, Tucker Carlson talks about these armed mobs and why we need the police. Weird. No, you know what this is? Tucker Carlson, this segment, yes, is it racist? Yes. It's also fear porn. Now, before I get into more of that, again, because I only showed you just a little bit, a little snippet, a little appetizer. So now here's part of the course.
This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate, they will. Anyone who's ever been subjected to the rage of the mob knows the feeling. It's like being swarmed by hornets. You cannot think clearly. And the temptation is to panic, but you can't panic. You've got to keep your head and tell the truth. Tell the truth. If you show weakness of any kind, they will crush you. Ask Drew Brees. By some accounts, poor Drew Brees is on his 4th apology for the crime of defending the American flag. He decided to apologize, and now they're using him as a propaganda organ, hostage tape after hostage tape. At a moment like this, there is no advantage in cowardice, in being Mitt Romney. You think you're saving yourself, you're just empowering the worst people who hate you.
So much projection here. But again, I got to ask, who's the mob, Tucker? That entire segment, along with being just full of fear-mongering, of course, is also incredibly coded. I mean, again, who does he think he's referring to as the mob? Black people, leftists? Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that the mob is not going to come to rural Pennsylvania. It's not the, stuff on your farm that Black Lives Matters wants. No. You know what they want? For police to stop shooting them. I mean, it's fairly simple, right? Now, to take that message, to turn it around, and to say that these people, they're coming to get you in your primarily white neighborhoods, is not just a dog whistle, it's a human whistle. It's loud enough, everybody can hear it. Everybody. Now, he also says, Democrats and the Black Lives Matter, well, they're trying to eliminate the police. Well, I mean, a lot of the conversation is actually on defunding the police, which isn't actually what it sounds like. So now, first, before I explain what that is, the Democratic Party right now is saying, whoa, let's not defund the police. No, we need the cops. Why is that? Well, cops happen to protect the wealthy. And of course, who owns a lot of the property? Wealthy people. Okay. So Joe Biden says, oh, no, let's not defund the police, right? Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about reform, right? Well, we've been talking about reform for years, for decades. And so, I mean, it seems like it's more useless platitudes. So now, defund, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, the right wing wants to tell you that, well, if you defund the police, it means they're just going to completely get rid of the police. There's going to be no cops whatsoever. That's actually not true. That's abolition of police. And yes, there are some on the left that are calling for the abolition of police. But defund just means taking away some of their excessive funding that we put into these departments and redistributing that to things like education, to things that will actually try to reduce the crime rate. For example, putting money into mental health screenings, putting money into anti-poverty programs, that kind of stuff, into after-school programs, things that have been shown to reduce the crime rates in the city, to be able to create more jobs so that people can work. And so that's the kind of stuff. Right now, in many cities, you have police departments that take an enormous amount of money in the budget. And of course, a lot of this is a result of, for example, in the 1980s, where Biden and a lot of the Democrats decided to adopt the Republicans' tough on crime mentality. Now, the thing about this is you had a lot of crime back in the 80s. Now, what's that a result of? You're not going to believe me, right? A lot of this has to do with lead poisoning. Let's be honest, right? What does lead do? Well, lead makes people more aggressive. It heightens people's aggression. Now, what we had is we had leaded gasoline back in the 60s, right? So we had all of this lead pollution in the air, in the water. And I forget the name of the scientist who found this out, who did all of these studies on lead and then really pushed to reduce the amount of lead in the air, in the environment. Now, of course, the result of having all this lead is you had a lot of people who were hyper aggressive. And in the places where you had all this pollution, i.e. low income neighborhoods, which happen to be more people of color, that's where you had that aggression epidemic. We still have areas that are low income, that are minority areas that are exposed to lead poisoning. Look at Flint. And that's going to show up in the future where people have cognitive issues and also issues with aggression. And so that's going to lead, of course, to an increase in policing. And so that's, I mean, again, that's from a scientific perspective. Claire Patterson, thank you. One of our viewers has said that the scientist that had fought against all of this lead pollution and went to Congress was Claire Patterson. And so, no, that was something that was really important. Okay. So now that said, okay, we don't have as much of an issue as we did back in the past. Now, look, you've seen these administrations, Democrats and Republicans, roll back protections and continue what's going on in Flint, was, of course, lead poisoning. So we are going to see that issue. But understand that back in the 80s, this is why you had all of this extra policing, all this tough on crime stuff, or at least that's one of the factors. Other factors are, of course, racism. And so, and racist policing, and, you know, you had efforts to try and fill, you know, prison beds and private, all this different stuff, right? And so we have that problem. But at the same time, what we should be doing is taking funding away and putting it into other areas in the community to solve these problems without having to invoke a heavy-handed approach. And so that's the issue, right? That's what we need to do. We need to go after the root causes of criminal behavior. That's poverty, desperation, mental illness, etc. We also need to get rid of things like the drug war. The drug war has caused a massive amount of violence, state-sanctioned violence, as well as, gang violence. And so we need to get rid of those things. We need to defund the police to make more funding available for these other programs. It's not saying get rid of the police, but we don't need to have these, not only just defund, but demilitarize as well. And it's not exactly the same thing. So that said, Tucker Carlson says, no, we shouldn't defund the police at all. We should have this police state that terrorizes communities of color with Bearcats and drones, predator drones, and then claims that leftists want to replace the cops with armed woke militias. Now, again, let me go back here, right? And go back to the conservative arguments of militias, right? No, wait, are conservatives in favor of militias? Well, only if they're white right-wingers. If they're armed leftists like Black Panthers, they hate them. Hate them. And so black people picks up a gun, he's automatically a thug. White person picks up an AR-15, you're a patriot. That's how this works. It's not an even playing field. That said, right, this is, what he's talking about is the right-wing fantasy of getting his guns or and really toppling a tyrannical government. That's what that is. Wasn't it a couple of months ago that these same people were ready to do that because they couldn't go and get a haircut? Now they say, oh no, it's the black people, it's the armed woke mobs that are trying to do this. And we don't accept that. We support the state. The hypocrisy, right? When it comes to actual oppression and state-sanctioned brutality, these supposed constitutional Second Amendment warriors are not just absent, they're on the side of repressive government. And they cannot wait to deep throat them boots. Now, furthermore, in that segment, there's more scaremongering. He said the left has taken over the Pentagon and now plan to do the same to law enforcement. When did the left take over the Pentagon? No. If the left took over the Pentagon, we would defund that too. We would slash the funding by 2/3, which would still make us the most, have the biggest war budget in the history of all other countries combined. We wouldn't have so much egregious funding, but we would still have an incredibly well-funded military. If we slashed it by 2/3, and we could take that money and fund healthcare for every single American. He also said this: imagine if Black Lives Matter rioters had weapons and immunity from prosecution. That's what they're talking about, partisan law enforcement. It's projection, man. Remember, you had state governments in cities passing 54 measures that restrict and criminalize nonviolent protest, including, get this, immunity for drivers to run over protesters who block traffic. Immunity for rioters, right? And people with weapons were, and that's what they say that Black Lives Matter is trying to do, which again is not true. Again, the entire purpose of Black Lives Matter is to say, hey, we don't want to get shot by police anymore. That's it. That's all they're asking for. And to reform and defund police departments into something that actually serve the community. It's amazing. 100% fear-mongering, 100% racist projection. Tucker Carlson, what he's doing is He's riling up scared white people into a lather in the hopes that Trump or Republicans will get elected as a result. And then do a gigantic police crackdown on leftists. Well, that's what they want. They want to keep minorities in their place as effectively second-class citizens by portraying their right to not be murdered by police as the mob. It's the most transparent racist conspiracy I've ever seen. But understand, this is who Tucker Carlson is. Do not be fooled at the times that he actually espouses working-class populism. He said earlier in that segment, Democrats aren't really doing anything to help the community. Now, is that true in some circumstances? Absolutely. And this is how he gets you, burying kernels of truth within racist propaganda. He talks about, I can't believe Democrats haven't shut down the payday and loan industry that preys on black people, and not just black people, but working class people of all colors. Well, there's a reason that both Democrats and Republicans support the payday and loan industry. It's because of their lobbyists on Capitol Hill. It always comes down to money. So these very institutions that Tucker Carlson wants to call out, but only for Republicans, give to both Republicans and Democrats, which allow them to continue operating. And there are Democrats, progressives, that are trying to crack down on the payday and loan industry. And of course, are blocked by establishment Democrats and Republicans. Don't let him sucker you into this, because this is a way, burying those little kernels of truth, is Tucker Carlson's way of sucking people into white supremacy. Don't fall for it. All right. One more here for you guys. All right. Minnesota police have admitted that state troopers and Minneapolis police officers have went around slashing tires. So now they had slashed the tires of dozens of cars late last month during the protests over the killing of George Floyd. So now the tires, or I should say the vehicles in which these police officers had slashed the tires of, belonged to demonstrators, medics, and journalists. So now I want to show you one of the videos here that was posted that was verified by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. And they said that their videos, of course, are legitimate, of officers dressed in military uniforms, puncturing tires of idle vehicles as protests against police brutality and racial injustice erupted. Bruce Gordon, spokesperson for the Department of Public Safety, said in a statement that state patrol troopers strategically deflated tires in an effort to stop behavior such as vehicles driving dangerously and at high speeds in and around protesters and law enforcement. We're here to protect you. We're just making sure that people don't drive crazy by slashing your tires. Now, I'm going to show you this video of who was affected the most. So take a look.
I just got back to my vehicle, parked in a lot, and the police slashed 1, 2, 3, 4 of my tires. And they've also slashed every other car that's parked in this lot's tires. Every car that's parked here has their tires slashed. Every single car. Unbelievable. I can't get home now.
we're doing it for your safety. Even though you're in the parking lot, we're still going to slash your tires. Ridiculous. Wow. Now, Gordon also said that the patrol officers targeted vehicles that were carrying, quote, items used to cause harm during violent protests. Okay, well, where's your proof of that? Oh, you didn't provide any. Right. Dude, come on. Are you serious? Now, a lot of people assume that protesters were to blame, but it was actually the police. Now, somebody said that, New York reporter Luke Mogelson said that these tires were slashed as he covered May 31st protests in Minneapolis. And according to Mother Jones, officers were following orders from the state multi-agency command center. So this was an order from on high. Slash them tires. That's what they said. And according to Mogelson, these officers that were doing it had grins on their faces and were laughing. This is when they told him, Mogelson, that they had slashed his tires. Hey, man, you know what's great? What was really awesome and hilarious? Us slashing your tires. Good luck getting home. Not only that, but your documentary producer, Andrew Kimmel, as I showed you, he was part of that video. He returned to his Kmart parking lot only to find that he had had all of his 4 tires slashed. And as I mentioned before, they slashed every other car, every single car. And in an interview in the Kmart parking lot later that same morning, a tow truck driver told Kimmel that he was, quote, so busy towing cars that had their tires slashed. Quote, medics over there, news crews, random people that were just here to protest, and tires slashed. It's unbelievable. Who are the thugs? Peaceful protesters and news crews, the press, or the police slashing tires? The police want to say, oh, no. The protesters, those guys are the thugs. Those guys are the real danger while we're out here literally destroying your property. I'm not saying that these protests haven't had their shares of violence and vandalism and smashing of windows, but you've also had police that have slashed tires and have been accused of putting in agent provocateurs, putting in random pallets of bricks to entice people into throwing them naturally, and to try to justify the heavy-handed response from police that we've seen, which involves them pushing over 75-year-old men, cracking skulls, and going after not just protesters, but the press. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing from the police thuggish behavior. This is why there is a national call to defund police. We see these tactics, we see them for what they are, and we want to do something about them. We have to do something about them because, again, this is absolutely unacceptable. Now, Minneapolis says that we're gonna disband the police and then reform as something different, something better for the community. Well, I think that's a good place to start. You get rid of all the police officers, fire them all, and then restructure to something different. You take the funding that went to heavy-handed tactics, that went to, riot police and this equipment that they have that makes them look like military members. No, get rid of that, and you fund other parts of the community that will actually help reduce crime, and you actually return the police to what they should be, officers of the peace officers, and not people that you would expect to see in the streets of Afghanistan, which we shouldn't be there anyway, but you get the point. All right. This is crazy, man. It's amazing what you see. what's happening. All right. That's it, man. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please subscribe or become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation or a channel member. Thank you all. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later. Stay safe.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Police splash.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.
Mike Pounds.